Hello and welcome back to DockTalk episode 6B. And that's sign language. I'm sure you know that, but
sorry.
She likes to do it.
Happens.
It's okay. So this week, the New Testament portion is on John 15 through 17. And basically, last week we touched on, I think it was 13 to 14. Mm-hmm. And it ended with, get up, let us go from here in 14:31. And then it starts right back into 15. It almost seems like repetition with a little more information. That's because it is. It is, scholars suggest that prior to the final draft of John, that it did end in 14:31. It's not to say that 15, 16, 17 were added and John may not have even wrote them. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that they think that they may have, because of the structure of how it's been written, that it may have been something they found later and put on. But I don't think that, because I really believe that that is a Hebraic way of writing. You'll write something that happened, and then the next thing you write is just expanding a certain point or a certain part of the first thing you just wrote, or just making it bigger, like Genesis 1 and 2. Exactly. You know, Genesis 1 and 2 aren't two different events. Genesis 2 is just expanding on Genesis 1.
A section, yeah.
All right, so let's begin. Let's see, John 15:1. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. Every branch in me that bears no fruit, he takes away, and every branch that bears fruit, he prunes, so that it bears more fruit. You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. Stay in me, and I stay in you. As the branch is unable to bear fruit of itself unless it stays in the vine, so neither you unless you stay in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who stays in me, and I in him, he bears much fruit, because without me you are able to do naught. I just want to go through different things about this parable that will help us understand exactly who we are and what our purpose is. So he's the vine. God is the vine dresser. That's very important. It's God's standards that he's going to look at you and your life and say, okay, I have Yeshua that walked it out perfectly. Now I'm putting you next to it. What did you look like? You know, if you're grafted in, you should look like him. That's our goal, is to look like him. When we emulate him, we bear fruit. And so with that, let's go, and I can prove that from Psalm chapter 1. So we're going to go to Psalms 1.
Psalms 1.
I know, it's very good. So, Psalms 1 says, Blessed is the man who shall not walk in the counsel of the wrong, and shall not stand in the path of sinners. And we know sin is breaking the law.
Missing the mark.
Missing the mark. And shall not sit in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the Torah of God, and he meditates in his Torah day and night. For he shall be as a tree planted by the rivers of water that yields its fruit in its season. Mm-hmm. And whose leaf does not wither, and whatever he does prospers. The wrong are not so, but are like the chaff which the wind blows away. Therefore the wrong shall not rise in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For Yahweh knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wrong comes to naught. He just said, if anything you do without me is not. And it's the same wording. It's the fruit analogy. So we are the branches who remain in him. The cut off branches are the disciples who do not obey his commandments. The fruit of the branches is our righteousness. The pruning are the trials and the purging of sin. We need to be very careful that every time a trial comes on us, we're not, God, the devil is really out to get me today. And it's not the Lord bringing that trial on us to purge us from sin. We need to ask ourselves, what am I grafted into? What do I believe Yeshua's purpose was? What do I believe he taught? Do I think that he canceled the Torah? But wait a minute, that goes against what a false prophet is, like Cam talked about in the Torah portion. According to Deuteronomy 13, if a prophet arises, even though he does signs and wonders, if he takes you away from the law of God that I am commanding you today today. I love that word today, because no matter what day you read it, it's today. Mm-hmm. The law I'm commanding you today, if he tries to take you away, he's a false prophet. So let's think about that, where the Jews stand right now. They say Jesus was a false prophet because we claim that he took us away from Torah. He freed us from Torah, which we are calling bondage, which isn't bondage. It's what God calls freedom. You know, I'm really starting to understand the more I learn that in the end, they will call good evil and evil good. Well, we think that's unbelievers, but he's talking about believers. We do call what's evil good and what's good evil. You know, we think Torah is evil and that's bad and it's done. You know, but yet whenever we have an opinion on something, we pull out a law. You know,
whatever supports our
opinion. Either you accept it all or you don't. And so going on. Let's see.
Preach it, girl.
Yeah. I really like in 15:14, you are my friends if you do whatever I command. Right. And what he commanded was that we do the will of the Father, and the will of the Father is Torah. You know, I think of the root system of the tree as Torah, because Torah is the foundation. Yeshua is that perfect spring up of the plant that came up, and we are the branches that branch off of him. It all fits together. That's why John, it can get very confusing. I am in the Father, and the Father is in me, and you are in me. You see how it works.
It's like the little Russian dolls. You know, you take the first one off, there's another one, you take
and
it off,
there's another one, and there's another one.
That's kind of how the scripture is. If you had to write out to describe that, this is what it looks like. It's the dolls.
Yes, and God's law encapsulates the entire thing. So if you take that away, then you have...
It's vulnerable because the one that protected it is gone.
Right. And Paul talks about that also in Romans 11, that the roots support us.
Yes.
And that the roots that he is talking about is Israel, but it's Israel in the sense of the Israel that is the perfect light to the nations. Mm-hmm. And in order to be the perfect light to the nations, we have to be obedient. First we have to get that through our heads. And you know, I just want to add this. I was wondering when the Lord called us to do DockTalk, I thought, well, that doesn't make sense because we're going to start over. Why do we need to start this now when in a month from now we'll be starting over in Genesis? Why are we starting at the end? You know, if you're just tuning in, you're starting at the end. And then it hit me because first you have to understand the reason you need the beginning. If you don't understand the reason you believe, if you can't accept that the whole word is valuable, then it doesn't matter where you start. And I believe that that's what the end of this book, the end of the Gospels, and the end of Deuteronomy is reiterating to that generation. See, the generation in Yeshua's time didn't get it. Just like the first generation when they sent the spies didn't get it. So they didn't get to go in.
Because that's the
pattern. But the second generation, where you're talking in Deuteronomy, they got it. Mm-hmm. They understood it. Well, the first generation of Yeshua's time, they didn't get it. You know, his disciples did, but a couple of centuries later, that whole idea was stifled and we went a completely different direction. Yeah. Well, here we are at the end again, and we're about to go into the land, per se, you know, just like in Deuteronomy, it's a pattern, and we're getting it. So the importance of what we're going to speak about, you know, in the end here will lead us right into in a month from now when we start from the beginning. And
what a great, you know, Julie just mentioned about the friend versus a slave. And, you know, wow, here's a prep of, okay, when I go to start the Torah, what do I want to be? Do I want to be the friend where I do have, you know, Abraham was a friend and was told what was going to happen? Or am I just going to be the servant, the one that's kind of dragged along going, fine, fine. But here's the thing. A servant, as we know from Exodus 21 and 22, we know, or 21, we know that the servant who then falls in love with his master becomes a bond servant, where he has his ear, and actually that's a part of this week's Torah portion too, where his ear is you know, pierced through his ear to the door, and the blood is on the door because you get that covenant with that master. And so now, here's the chance. You can be a servant where it's like, oh, yeah,
I don't really know what my master is doing. Okay, that's what the whole thing is for.
Yeah. And a lot of, in all honesty, that's where a lot of us are and have been for years. And now we're learning, no, you fall in love with your master, and you're like, no, I want to be a bond servant. And then once you're that bond servant, you're now a friend because you've committed to remain forever within that household. And that's what that the whole thing on Exodus 21 talks about how you go from a slave, a servant, to a bondservant,
right,
and then a friend.
And it's funny because the ones who are not doing the commandments, when you look in Revelation, Revelation 22 says, I come with my reward for those who are doing the commandments of Moses. They will be given the tree of life. Outside are and he names all these things, and the very last thing is the ones who love falsehood. See, so many people are doing falsehood, and I'm sure there's a lot of things that we're still doing that are false.
We're learning.
But the point is, do you love your falsehood and say, I know you're probably right, but I'm just going to fall back on His grace, and I'm going to do my falsehood? Or are you saying, you know what, thank God for His grace that covered my sin of ignorance, but now I want to walk in His ways. I want to learn His ways. This is for eternity. The millennium, they're going to be learning His ways. Do we want to be a part of that? Do we want to be a part of eternity? Or are we going to be miserable because we hate His ways? We need to really ask ourselves that. Do we want to be inside the gates? Do we want to be outside the gates?
So the real question is this. Do I love God more and His ways, or do I love the way I do things more because it feels really good to do it the way I want to?
Right. That's a lot of the times we're in love with the emotion of who we think God is. What we're telling you is there is so much more, and it is so much more satisfying.
And the definition of worship is so much bigger.
And if you are sick, when you eat nothing but candy every day, you get sick. And when you get into Torah, you get meat, you get potatoes, you get the vegetables, you get the salad, and you get some dessert. It's still all there, but you get the rounded, the full package. Let's move on to 16. Okay, 16, the theme is you will be hated by the world. And they shall put you, this is verse 2, they shall put you out of the congregations, but an hour is coming when everyone who kills you shall think he is rendering a service to Elohim. And I'm going to stop here for just a second because Paul did this. Paul thought he was doing God a great service by killing the blasphemers. They thought Yeshua and his followers, the way is what they called it, were blasphemers. And since then, the Jews did this, then the Catholic Church did this, Martin Luther did this, and it goes on and on. I mean, many people that we look to as our church fathers killed in the name of God. The Crusaders, he says they'll think they're doing a disservice. They'll think they're doing me a service by doing that, and that's not what he came to do. He did not. He's going to take care of that. It's not our job to go out and do that. So, and then 17 is just the farewell prayer, and it's in 3 parts. The farewell prayer is in 3 parts. The first part is for the glorification of the Son, meaning Him, Yeshua, not that Son. No. The second part is on behalf of the 11 disciples that were left because Judas was gone. And the third is for the unity of all believers. And I just want to end with a saying that First Fruits of Zion had in the commentary because it's really, really good. It says, the unity of the believers is accomplished in the spiritual, but if the world is to know that the God of Israel is the God who sent this Messiah, His disciples must strive toward manifesting this ultimate unity. The final unity of the people of God will ultimately blossom in the love of Messiah and the Torah of God. That's spirit and truth, where he talks about, that Yeshua talked about. This is the promise of the new covenant. No longer will a man teach his neighbor. The Torah will be written on our hearts as the standard of unity, the ultimate point of oneness to which we are all headed. It is the business of the disciples to live now for the realization of this Messianic age. That is our call. That is the purpose of the Holy Spirit, to lead us and to guide us into those truths so we do know how to walk and we can represent Him properly, and we will be grafted into the correct tree. So we are done.
We are done. Another week in the can.
So I guess we will see you next week for episode 7. Wow, we're getting up there.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Shalom.